Okay, well, let us begin. We're going to get started looking at Islam this week. And, when I first got these books and I was looking at the progression of how it was set up, starting with Judaism, going to Roman Catholicism, and then going to Islam after that, I'm like, why? This doesn't really make sense. Preparing for this lesson, it makes sense to me now. There were some common threads actually between Judaism and Roman Catholicism, and then I saw a lot more common threads between that and Islam. So part of the reason I didn't know why there were so many connections is because I was so ignorant of all of that. So this was really cool. Interesting study for sure. Before we begin, Aaron, Holly, would you care to lead us in a prayer? Amen. Awesome. Thank you very much. So the word Islam in general just means submission. And so that's what it literally translates out to be. And a Muslim, a follower of Islam, is one who submits to God. And so that's where the translations come in. That's what that actually means. It's what it stands for. And Islam makes up about 20% of the world's population. And that number is still pretty accurate, actually. It may be closer to 25 at this point, actually, to be honest, because it's still growing. But second only to Christianity. And so Christianity is more so along the lines of 30-ish percent, maybe a little more. And so Islam is the second religion in the world. Based on that, we should probably know a little bit about it. Now, here's the thing, though. It's hard to summarize such a large religion, large group of people like this in, 2 class periods. The same as it is to try and summarize all of Christianity with a certain set of beliefs. Because, if you were to describe Christianity to somebody who had never heard of it before, what would you describe to encompass all of Christianity in the entire world? I mean, Jesus, we got that, but, was Jesus the Son of, was Jesus really God? Was he fully human, fully God? I think we'd have different viewpoints on that in different branches of Christianity. Let's do something easy then. What does it take to be saved? I think we'll get some different responses there too. And so, the same thing, trying to put all of Christianity in a box, that's like looking at Islam and trying to put that in a block? We'll put it in a box. Blocks are harder to get into. But anyways, you have, and we'll get into some of this, but there are currently 2 main divisions of Islam, one of them much larger than the other. But within those divisions, there's divisions of those divisions, what we would consider denominations, I think. This sort of the same idea applies. But there are some overarching themes that I think is really helpful to look at and think through. All right. Islam did began in Saudi Arabia. That is, and to tell you the truth, my geography, don't ask me where that is. A lot of these, I am not familiar with. It's a long way from here. But a lot of these places, this is where it is most common for you to find Muslims. Now, that being said, even though, Saudi Arabia is still one of the leading, it's outnumbered by several other countries now. Indonesia has the greatest population of Muslims currently. Pakistan is second. Bangladesh is third. India is fourth. And India, I cheated a little bit. I sent an email to the guy that lives in India that we support, Isaac Nagur, and I asked him his input. He actually didn't have a whole lot to say about Islam because most of the people that he encounters are Hindu. And so I'll have more information about that. But there are a couple things he shared. So we'll get to that probably Wednesday, actually. But there's that. But then that next sentence, or next paragraph, is where this comes in for us. the exchange, people that are studying or coming from different countries to either go to college, universities, or even become doctors. We have a lot of that happening around here, like in Pulaski County. I'm thinking of several people specifically that I've interacted with that I know who fall into that category. So Islam isn't something that we find only overseas, somewhere else. But there are people here, and there's a mosque in Somerset. So, like, we will interact with those people at some point. And so it's good to have a little bit of background knowledge and information about what they believe, what they think, and their thought process and all this. Now, I'm going to be completely straight up with you and upfront in saying Islam has gotten probably one of the worst public personas in the past, 20 years or so than most other religions. And we got to be careful not associating current Muslims, people that we interact with acts of terrorism that has been prolific throughout the world. I saw a figure based on, so big words like Al-Qaeda or Taliban or ISIS, those three major things. That makes up actually about 0.02% of the total Muslim population in the world. So, a lot of times we like to judge things based on the extremist, and that's not a fair approach. Because, what if people judged Christianity based on only the most extreme part? There are people that bomb abortion clinics, or just like that sort of thing. And so, just keep an open mind as we're going through this, and let's look. In general, I think most people in the world, they're very sincere in what they believe, and they're not going to want to associate with something that is just evil. There's no really other way to put that. So, in general, let's approach it a little bit more open-mindedly. The symbols, I don't know a whole lot about that, except there's the crescent moon, there's the star. That is typically the symbol for Islam. And some of the meaning is kind of lost to history. But as far as the moon thing, the practices of Islam are tied to the lunar calendar. There is a completely different calendar. Like right now, it is not the year 2022. If you're a Muslim, the Islamic calendar, it's year 1443. So 1443, and the start date, by the way, I guess that's the logical next question. Where did that come from? It was the migration of Muhammad from Mecca, where he was born, to Medina, to this other area, and where he started getting those revelations from the angel Gabriel, as we're going to talk about. And their calendar is based on the lunar calendar. So 29 days for the lunar calendar, which is different from ours. So their year is about 354-ish days. So that's a little less. And so the way that's, and I guess I'll give you this since I wrote it down. Their current year is from August 10th of last year through July 28th of this year. So July 29th will be a brand new year for Muslims. So there you go. It would actually keep going backwards. So it would be like July, 10th or something for the next year. Because it's a shorter time period, like 354-ish days, and so it's like shorter. So, it's really interesting. It's very heavily focused on the moon and that lunar type thing. And a lot of what we're going to find out, what we're going to see here is Muslim doctrine, Muslim concepts of religious beliefs, of what we do, is heavily based on several different things. There was a heavy influence, and this leads into the history and founder thing, so thank you for that segue. We have, obviously, Muhammad. We've heard that name, and that is like the prophet, the greatest prophet of Islam, what they would say. And he was born in 570 A.D. In Mecca, which is present-day Saudi Arabia. So that was where he was. Some stuff that probably doesn't matter. His father he died before he was born. His mother died when he was 6. Then he moved in with a grandparent who died when he was still pretty young, so then he moved in with an uncle. So there's a lot of moving around. But he was in an area that was very heavily influenced by Hinduism, as we're going to find out is very polytheistic. So a lot of different gods. There was the Kaaba, which is a cubical structure that so there was like 360 different deities that were worshipped there. And each Arabian tribe handpicked its own deity, came to Mecca to pay homage to its god. So you'll notice there that there was a pilgrimage associated with that, which I think influenced some of what came later, as we'll see. But okay, yeah, some of what this did. Muhammad was a merchant, and it was the practice of a lot of people in that area to sort of seclude themselves in an area. He chose a cave, and so he would go and just spend some time alone trying to reflect, whatever. It was during this time that Muhammad supposedly received his first revelation from the angel Gabriel. There were some interactions, I should say this. There were some interactions with Christians and Jews from the area. Now, obviously, he had that Hindu upbringing around him, and so there was so many different things that he was accustomed to. Now, what kind of Christians did he encounter? What kind of Jews did he encounter? It's uncertain, but from things that we find quoted from him, is that he saw them as a threat. And he saw, Christians and Jews were coming in. And I mean, think about the Christianity that would have been prevalent at that time. Again, here I think is why we studied Catholicism last week, because in this time, that was the Christianity that he would be more than likely to encounter, in which there was, throughout the history of Catholicism, there was some violence, there was some overtaking. If you don't convert to Christianity, then I will kill you. That sort of concept. So, there was a little bit of that going in. And keep that in mind, Catholicism, because some of the practices of Islam and some of that, I think, is related. And the Jewish faith as well, there was a lot of stuff that came into being from that. And so, when we get to what the sacred writing, the book of Islam, the Quran, what that was supposedly this book of direct revelations from God through the angel Gabriel. We should be familiar with the angel Gabriel. That's a pretty important angel in our history as well. So there was that, and Quran literally translated means recitations. Do you know, in Islam, if you were born into a Muslim family, by the age of 5, you were, okay, the Quran was written in Arabic, and still to this day, if you're a practicing Muslim, you are going to have to learn Arabic in order to read the Quran. And chances are you're going to, by the age of 6, definitely have read through the entire thing. And you're probably going to have most of it memorized. And some of that even before you can even read, because very heavy into reciting the Quran as part of their prayers. So there was a lot of that. I'm jumping around a little bit, but just showing you where this is going. The Quran is written much differently than what the Bible is written. In the Bible we have narrative sections, we have poetic sections, we have apocalyptic section. There's different styles of writing and all of that. The Quran is supposed to be written like from the standpoint of this is the information God is giving directly to Muhammad, or he's sharing about interactions he's had with other prophets, or that sort of thing. So that's where that came from. All right. So there's a lot actually about the life of Muhammad that we don't completely know about. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what he did, what he thought, the way he lived, because really, the first recorded information about the life of Muhammad, the earliest copies of those manuscripts that we have are like 250 years after Muhammad. There's some biographical stuff that's like 150 years afterward, but there's some time that's removed there. So it's kind of hard to really pinpoint exactly who he was, how he lived, and the thought process behind some stuff, and there was some things that we can know for sure. The military aspect, he did invade some places, and there's some stuff here about he took control of Mecca and started to unify all the tribes of the Arabian Peninsula under the religion of Islam, kind of what the Romans did with Catholicism. He was doing the same thing with Islam, so there was that. Well, and I think a lot of it is you don't want to paint a picture of your leader as not being everything you think he should be, if that makes sense. And so sometimes history is written with a sort of a skewed view of, and I mean, a lot of history is written that way. Like, some people just not wanting to talk against their Pharaoh of Egypt or whatever. And so there's some stuff that's missing. And so I think it's a mixture of there not being enough writings that survived early on, but also people wanting to view him in a certain light. There was a quote I saw of somebody. So on the next page, there's a description. I'll get back to the whole distinction between Sunni and Shiite Muslims. But there's a distinction there in that sort of the second paragraph on page 30, talking about the Sunnis emphasize the authority of the written traditions, not only in the Quran, but also in the Sunnah, where you get the Sunni's name. And the Sunnah includes the Hadith, which is like some of the statements and conduct of Muhammad that his companions had recorded. But there's another type of thing, and that's the one, by the way, the earliest copies of the Hadith was 250 years after Muhammad. The other thing the other documents that they look at is called the Sirah, and that's not in your book, but Sira, and that was like the actual biography of the events that happened in his life and the things that he did, and still that was like over a century later. And from what I hear about that, one of the earliest copies was not complete because whoever was holding on to that copy was recorded as saying, I threw away the parts I didn't want. And so it's like, well, that's interesting. So it's kind of strange how that works out. But it is hard to know exactly. So we go based on, some of this is based on what other cultures and other peoples who had been either taken over or whatever. So we use some of that. But yeah, again, it's hard. It's hard to know.
So the only reason I asked that is bringing it up, envisioning myself having a conversation with someone,
Mm-hmm.
and I asked them about this time gap.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that bother you? And I expect they would have a very similar question about Christianity.
Yes.
There's a time gap. Doesn't that bother you?
Yep.
But it sounds like the sheer number of not just
Yeah, and I think that's where we're going to get to. Like Wednesday, that is it. Because I think one thing that one thing that Muslims will say about Christianity is, okay, well, your source text for your New Testament, that was written in Greek. Jesus probably spoke Arabic. The first church in Jerusalem was probably Hebrew. So already we're getting a translation of Jesus' actual words. But then what survived for the longest time was a Latin copy of the scriptures. And so for 1,000 years, you had that Latin, which was a translation of a translation of a translation of what was there. And then when we finally get it to English, we actually took a German version of that and then translated that to English. So we had a translation of a translation of a translation of a translation of a translation. And so it's like, how do you know that what we read is accurate? But there you go. You go into actual textual criticism and a lot of what Kyle's been preaching about. And we need to be prepared with some of that in there because of the time gap between our earliest known manuscripts to when they were written is very short. And just the sheer volume, the amount, how many is there. I mean, we have just thousands upon thousands of at least partial manuscripts. And even leaving all that out, just think about the quotes that we have from early church fathers. I think there's like over 30,000 of those that we could almost rewrite the New Testament just using those quotations, just taking those and putting them together. But that's more so along the lines of how we discuss this, because if we use that same type of logic and reasoning to the Bible about whether or not Scripture is accurate, and we use that looking at some of the writings of Islam, the Quran, and especially the Hadith and the Sirah and all those, it's not even close. So that's really good thought. Yeah, and more.
If you're going to cover this, tell me be patient, not be patient.
Okay.
But before we got onto the Sunni and Shiite, prior to Muhammad, what are the majority of people like Muhammad? What do they consider themselves? How do they worship? If you know what they would have.
So you mean what Muhammad was teaching and what his direct followers were doing?
So following Muhammad, we see the rise of Islam.
Right.
But prior to Muhammad,
Prior to that.
I could be wrong. They're descendants of Ishmael.
Yes.
What does their worship look like?
Well, see, that's the thing. What Muhammad was, I don't think that they would consider him this, but what we would say is a restorationist. Someone who goes back to the original, what they would have considered to be the truth of what the Old Testament taught. So there's a lot of things in Islam. If you talk to someone who is Muslim, they'll tell you that we accept the Torah. We accept the Gospels. But they have been corrupted, so the version you're actually reading isn't what really happened in history. And so you got things in the Quran that, like, for example, Ishmael, how Ishmael was viewed. So Abraham is a very high figure in Islam. So was Adam. And actually, a lot of the other Old Testament prophets, even Moses. Jesus is an important prophet, yeah. And, so we have all of this stuff. Now, the things written about Ishmael, according to the Quran, he was the one that Abraham was told to sacrifice. And Ishmael, in the Quran, is recorded as saying, he like reaffirming Abraham. So Ishmael was seen as like giving courage to Abraham to follow God, to submit to God. And so that's where like you'd think. And so what Muhammad was able to do is take that and say, I'm restoring our people to our lineage. Now, their lineage, I think they could trace back because Abraham was told there's going to be a great nation that comes through Ishmael. And there was. But a lot of the worship of that area was primarily Hindu. And so it was just that. I think what happened, though, is, a lot of this is conjecture, so grain of salt, or the whole salt shaker. Like, you have interactions with Jews who would have these stories, who would have this written down. And if I'm Muhammad and I'm hearing some of this, and I'm reading through some of the Torah and some of that, it's like, wait, Ishmael, we are descendants, because that's where we are, that's where we have settled. And so because of that, the gears start turning, and then you make some connections, and then there you go. Yeah. Yes. Right. Exactly.
Which is
Okay.
spiritually
Yes. So it's like the big three religions in the world all go back to Abraham. And so if we have no other common ground, we can go to Abraham. So that's
What's interesting is Ishmael, and Paul even uses this language. Ishmael is a covenant.
mhm.
God makes a covenant with Abraham. Well, really, seemingly with Hagar, but
Yeah.
that there's going to be a great nation that comes through Ishmael. He's going to have 12 sons. They're going to be 12 princes, and they're going to be mighty. I mean,
Yeah.
all of that is things that God says is going to be true. And so, I don't know. I guess I see it looking back. I could see how you might look at this and go, look, we were covenant people too.
Yeah.
We didn't get the law. We didn't enter into a covenant with God. I mean, whether or not they believe that or not, that's based off of my understanding of reading through the Old Testament. But on some level, they would go far enough back.
Yeah.
Our ancestors had a relationship with God, and it resulted in the birth of a child that God blessed to say it will become a great nation, just like Abraham.
Exactly. And like you were, it's hard to know exactly throughout the years of what that looked like for that nation. Like, what did Ishmael teach his children, and what did the 12 tribes of Ishmael, like what did they do, and how did they teach? And that I don't know. But all we have is, well, what we're looking at now is sort of like a restorationist view of like looking back and appropriating some of those things, I think, in that faith. Yep.
I find it interesting the parallels that the author of this book made between Muhammad and Joseph Smith.
That was interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
It was very. I never, not knowing this particular background as well. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. It's
It's like a smorgasbord.
yes.
You pick and choose the parts that I like and bring them together, and all of this came by inspiration from an angel of God, and there you have what brand new religion.
It's history repeats itself, I think, is that's pretty accurate. And so a lot of what we see with a lot of these, we'll see some commonalities between a lot of these, and it is interesting to put it in that frame of reference, because I think we would be more familiar with the Joseph Smith instead of Muhammad. But yeah, I like that. It's really good. The two major divisions in Islam came from the death of Muhammad. Now, as far as we know, Muhammad died natural causes. He got sick. Don't know what that looked like. Don't know what that was. But he got sick and he died. The question that came after is, well, who takes up leadership? Who's going to lead? And there was a major split, major division of whose authority we take. The Sunni Muslims insisted that Muhammad's successor should be elected. So it's someone who we as a group agree should lead us, take us on. And I think that came from a more like Catholic viewpoint. Now, the Shiite Muslims thought that he should come through Muhammad's bloodline. And so this is more of a Jewish approach, I think. And that would have meant that Ali, who was Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, would have been his successor. So people who follow Ali. By the way, I can't pass this up without saying Muhammad Ali. There you go. Thank you. a lot of people who are Muslims use names that are common throughout the Quran or the history of Islam to name. And if you convert to Islam, you're probably going to take that on. It is, yeah. Yes. Right. Exactly. Yeah, and that was like the prophecy that they had, and so that's why it's such a common name for sure. Now the name of this like successor, the person who's in charge was the Khalif, and that was towards the top of that page at the beginning. I forgot to mention that. There is no current Khalif. The last one at the end of World War I, the fall of the Ottoman Empire, that was the last Khalif. And so since then, there has not been a Khalif who's been in power. Now, there have been some extremist groups who have claimed to have a Khalif. Most recently, well, maybe not most recent, but with Al-Qaeda, their leader, Osama bin Laden. You have ISIS with their, I don't know. But there have been some groups that have stood up and said, no, this is our leader. And that's what they call him.
Is there anything in the Quran that says the Khalif must have these qualities, similar to how Roman Catholics view a saint?
No.
So the idea of electing a Khalif was just the guy that we think will do the best job.
Yes. Yep. That's my understanding of it. And so, like, even to this day, there's still a major division about whose authority we accept. And that impacts what writings that they accept as being authoritative and how they view their life in general. Currently, Sunnis are about 80% of the Muslim population. So if you run into a Muslim, they are probably going to be Sunni. Because the other group, the Shiites, they are mainly focused in the Middle East. There are specific places where you'll find a lot of Shiite Muslims. Sunnis, you'll probably run into those, and the Sunnis are the ones who accept the authority of the Quran, but also the Sunnah, which is the Hadith and the Sirah, things written about Muhammad and some of his teachings, and it sort of fills in the gaps where the Quran is silent. So I view that. Okay, no. Yes, okay, there it is. Yeah. So that's what we're going to see most of the time. The Shiites, on the other hand, are more authority-oriented rather than consensus-oriented. So instead of voting for what we see as the best thing, it's, no, we have to find in the Quran, book, chapter, verse, for what we have. And they believe that God spoke through an imam, the Muslim equivalent of the Catholic Pope, and that sort of thing. There is a major difference here in that the Sunnis believe there should be a separation between civil and religious authorities, but the Shiites maintain that religious authorities should exercise both political and religious power. And so it's a completely different worldview, right? Whether you're going to allow the government to sort of be in control of the religion, and it's like a government/religion, which is more of a Shiite doctrine, as opposed to the Sunnis that were, more so, let's keep it separate. So there's some things there. Yep, I do. Yeah. Yep, that's fair. And a lot of the extremists do come mainly from the Shiite group, and there are typically places, and they gain access to more places through military conquest, and that's a lot of what really drives. Now, it's not a fair statement to say that all Shiites view it that way, but from the Muslim population as a whole, it is from the Shiites that you would find the most extreme, if that makes sense. There are 5 pillars of Islam, and I think that these are some of the more unifying principles. These are the things that if you are a Muslim, that this is some of your core beliefs. And, okay, well, these aren't necessarily your beliefs. These are the things that you do. This is like your actions, the things that if you do, you're doing well. So first of all, the first pillar is the profession of faith. There's no God, no other God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. So really trying to separate themselves from the polytheistic society that was around them. And so we are solely monotheistic, and God, Allah, is that was just the Arabic word for God. And so what they see is the God of the Old Testament, the God of the New Testament. That's the God. What they would say in their mind is the one true God, and that there is no other gods. Side note, they would view the Christian view of the Trinity as being polytheistic, and saying that if you claim Jesus as God, then that diminishes God. They wouldn't even say the Father. They would, because they don't have a concept of that. It's God is very impersonal, very like no personal relationship. You can't call him a father, and so he is God, and that's all we can say about that. So there's that. Number 2, worship is to be observed 5 times each day, and that's mainly prayer. And a lot of their prayers, it's reciting part of the Quran. It's very specifically facing towards Mecca. And so they'll clearly indicate that in their house or in their mosque, wherever they are. Almsgiving, over 2% of one's wealth is to be paid to the poor. There was a big push in order to have more of an equality of economic status. And so that is one thing that they make sure that they pay to the poor. Either you can give it to the mosque that will distribute it, or further the teachings of Islam, or giving directly to the poor. That is acceptable as well. Fasting is to be observed during the month of Ramadan. Ramadan is their month of celebration of just honoring the time that Muhammad spent with the angel Gabriel. Not ready, but not at all. But he was getting those revelations from what they say. And fasting has to be observed during daylight hours. So it's from sunrise to sunset. The fasting, so you can be focused in on prayer and that sort of thing. And the 5th thing is the pilgrimage, or the Hajj. And it's to be made to Mecca at least once in a person's lifetime, echoing back to some of the Hinduism practices of that huge temple in Mecca. I think that's probably where it came from. But modern day, what you would, if you were a Muslim and you went to their holy land, the pilgrimage to Mecca, what you'd be doing is, according to the teachings of the Quran, you'd be observing this some actions between Abraham and Hagar. Hagar. It's the same thing. So, and there's actually an Islam version, Quran version, that has sort of different name, like Ibrahim, whatever. Anyways, you have that idea where you're going to be offering prayers, you're going to be reciting parts of the Quran that are dedicated to that, and walking certain paths that is traditionally, from their view, where Abraham and Hagar went, and you'll go like back and forth between different places. Remember the story of when Hagar was sent out into just the wilderness, and she thought she was going to die. She thought Ishmael was going to die, and looking for water and all that sort of thing. Well, that's what that is about, actually. And so, on top of that, you would go and you would worship all together. Everybody dresses the same, no social distinctions between, and you would have just like millions of people all around, just walking, saying prayers together in Arabic and all of that. So there's that. Okay, real quick, let me throw some stuff at you. So in preparation for Wednesday, we're going to look at some of the doctrines in particular and specific, and how to look at that. I think you'll find some things very interesting, especially their view of Mary. They have a very high view of Mary, very Catholic-esque view of Mary, and their view of Jesus as coming back for the resurrection. So that's some interesting stuff. We'll talk about that. But okay, here you go. If you have conversations with a Muslim, things that they might bring up is they will say, "Show me in the Bible where Jesus claims to be God." And there's a few verses that they have already laid out saying, okay, you're going to use this, but that doesn't work. You're going to use this, but that doesn't work. So here are a few things to consider, especially John 17. The book of John is heavy on a lot of this. John 17, verse 3, they say, Jesus makes the claim that God is the only God, so he can't be God if he makes that statement. This is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you sent. And so they're like, okay, see here, there's a distinction. We have God, then we have Jesus. Okay, there's the statement in John 17, 20 and 21, where that we would look at it as like Jesus is praying that they be one. You know, that just as I and you, Father, are one, that the apostles may be one. And what they will say about that is, well, Jesus isn't claiming to be one in authority and godship as God. He's claiming he wants to be one with God, and he wants the apostles to be one with him spiritually. And so the same way the apostles are one with Jesus, he is with the Father, like it's a spiritual thing. There's all these like in Mark 5 when Jesus said, "Who touched me?" Like, wouldn't God know who touched him? Matthew 19:17, there is no one good but God alone. He also makes that statement in Mark 10:18. There's the thing in Mark 13 where it says Jesus doesn't know the end of time. Only God knows that. And the statement in John 14:28, the Father is greater than I. So how do we look at that? How do we get through that? Are there other verses that we can look at as showing that Jesus is claiming to be God? I think there are some. So look into that. Think through that. And also Trinity, the doctrine of the Trinity. Because they would very much say Trinity is no bueno. You can't do that because that is polytheism. We serve one God. How can we serve one God when you're saying there are three gods? And so it's very specific. Guess I'll have to stop there, but just think through some of that, and we'll pick that up, Lord willing, on Wednesday. Thank you, guys.